I spent the last 25 years trying to transform education. And what I've come to realize is I've been focused on the wrong thing. You see, I've been focused on big ideas, things that could scale, things that would change the game. I've helped change laws. I've set standards. I've demanded accountability. I've focused on data. I've leveraged technology. And I've advocated for innovation. But what I came to realize is that I was missing the thing that matters most. Let me share my story. You see, I'm the proud son of educators. My mother was a math teacher. My father, a school principal, a superintendent, later a university professor. I was the youngest of 6 kids. My mom was 42 when she had me. You might say I was that bonus baby. What it really meant is that my older brothers and sisters had essentially moved on, and I was stuck at the dinner table with 2 educators. I heard all sorts of stories. My mother was more pragmatic. She'd talk about the challenges of hormones in a big middle school, the importance of using every second, not only to improve instruction, but because it helped you with classroom management. My dad, he was more of a philosopher. He loved the exchange of ideas, and he had these looks, and he had these sayings. I thought they were kind of corny. He'd say things like, well, Jim, if you want the oats a little cheaper, you got to wait till they come through the horse. He'd say things that I thought were more profound, but I didn't really understand, like learning is incidental to the operation of schools. Well, by the time I graduated and headed off to college, I knew one thing for sure, and that is I was not going into education. So I went to play baseball and thought I'd pick up a degree in engineering along the way. And then I met calculus. My plans had to change. I graduated with a degree in business, but that tug on my heart, those conversations about education, kept bringing me back. So I married a teacher. She's actually my high school sweetheart, the love of my life, and her name's Teresa. I became a teacher too. I loved the classroom, and I loved coaching. When that light bulb goes on, when that accomplishment that comes from hard work happens, it's what I call the paycheck you can't cash. One day I got a call. It was an old friend of my father's, Dr. Robert Mills. He said, Jim, I've got an opportunity for you to get in on the ground floor of something big in education. I said, what is it, Bob? He said, I'm not going to tell you, but I want you to come with me to a meeting. It was April 1995. The meeting he took me to was the trustees of Central Michigan University. It was when they authorized the first charter school in Michigan and became the first university in the country to authorize a school. It wasn't without controversy. I remember the media cameras there. The next day it was the front page story above the fold across the state. I told Bob I had to think about it. So I went back home to that dinner table and I asked my parents for their opinion. Now remember, my mom was pragmatic. She said, charters, what? And my dad, he just looked at me with that grin. And he said, Goenner, where do you think you're going to get the horses to make that run? I sought other opinions. I got pros and cons. But the one that sealed the deal for me was the one that said, Jim, if you take that job, you will never work in public education again. Now, I knew what he meant by that. I knew that people viewed charters as imposters, as intruders, that they weren't real public schools. But I had done my homework. I knew they were public. There's so many misconceptions. And so I'm going to give you a 30-second overview of some facts. Number one is they are public schools. They're free and open to all children. They're funded by the state. They can't charge tuition. There's no discrimination. They serve special needs students. They have to be really efficient because they can't levy property taxes. They have a performance contract called a charter. If they perform well, they continue. If they don't, things have to change or they can actually get closed. You see, I was an authorizer. As the authorizer, you issue the charter contract. You establish the performance and accountability standards. And yes, if you have to close the school, it comes with the job. It was the thing I wanted to do the least, but it had to be done from time to time, and I've got the scar tissue to prove it. What really attracted me to the charter idea, though, was just that. It was an idea. It was an idea about how could we improve the whole of public education. It was premised on the notion that choice and competition would be the rising tide that would lift all ships. And I always wanted everybody to be their best. What happened on that journey is I learned something that I couldn't find in the classroom, in the schoolroom, or even the boardroom. It's something that came to me through life. You see, I think it might have been part of my mother, the pragmatist, because I couldn't get the idea of insanity out of my head. I didn't want to be trying to change something over and over again with no results. And that's what attracted me to the charter idea. I thought we could do something different. And so we focused on all sorts of things. Accountability was a big one. In fact, every charter law is different, but they all have this one phrase in common. And that is, the authorizer's job is to ensure that the school complies with its contract and all applicable law. Well, I was a young man. I wanted to do my job well. So I went to see the state superintendent and I said, can you give me that list of all applicable law? I want to make sure we in the schools we charter are adhering to it. He looked at me and he laughed. He said, Jim, that's never been compiled. I said, you're kidding me. So we embarked on a journey to find what all those applicable laws were. And by the end, we found over 250 that applied to all public schools. It stood about 4 feet high. It left quite an impression. Because when everything is important, then nothing is. I'd come to that realization in another way as well. But at the time, I didn't have a choice. The law was the law, the auditors were coming, and I had to be able to prove that we were doing our job and the schools were compliant. And so we leveraged the power of technology. Our theory was that if we could streamline and automate that regulatory reporting, the schools would be in compliance with the law, but it wouldn't distract them from their core mission of teaching and learning. It actually worked. Today we call it Epicenter. It's deployed from Hawaii to DC. We got a lot of praise from the Michigan Department of Education, from the United States Department of Education. We were called the gold standard. But now I want to tell you about a game changer for me. It was the birth of our 7th child, Natalie. I was 42, my wife was 40. She was our bonus baby. When Natalie came to us, though, she came to us with an extra chromosome, Down syndrome. When she was helicoptered out of our small town hospital to the University of Michigan, I had lots of fears. Had we done something wrong? Could she be fixed? I'm embarrassed to say that now. But after spending 2 weeks in the neonatal center, sleeping in the Ronald McDonald House, Natalie gave me a mind shift, one that I'm so thankful for. You see, what Natalie taught our family is that it's not what you do, it's who you are that is so critically important. It's also changed my view of education. Natalie says the darndest thing. She loves life. In fact, I want to share her joy with you. Sometimes she says, Dad, you're so complicated. Keep it simple. But she's got a heart of joy. She loves to learn. And the one thing we do in schools a lot is we put labels on them. On schools, on kids, on teachers. And the last thing I ever wanted was for Natalie to go to a school and be labeled, because I know she'd be labeled at risk. Natalie's so precious. She doesn't think there's anything wrong with her. And what I came to learn is there isn't. She's amazing. I tell her every day, you're so smart. You're so kind. You're so joyful. And you're so adorable. But now let me tell you about another game changer. This was our firstborn, Luke. Luke was 16. He was a top student and athlete. His mom and I were so proud of him. Luke was smart. He had the test scores to prove it. Well, one evening in February, I'd come out of a big meeting in Detroit. It was a really important meeting. I was with the power players. They were people that had been appointed by the governor and the mayor of Detroit. They had invited me in to help find solutions for improving education. I had pitched them a big and bold idea. To my chagrin, they liked it. In fact, the whole group was coalescing around it. I'd started home. I was on the freeway. My mind was racing with all the possibilities. And then I got a call. It was my son, Luke. He said, "Dad, I just killed someone." My heart stopped. I hoped it was a sick joke. I said, "How do you know?" He said, "He's lying in the road." "Did you call 911? "Yes." "When the police get there, go to them. They'll take care of you." Click. The call ended. I was overwhelmed with emotion. I called my wife. She had to go to the scene. I was helpless. I was 2 hours from home. You can only imagine the thoughts that went through my head as I made that drive. When I walked through the front door, I hugged my wife, I hugged my son, and I realized that that evening was a game changer for our family. You see, Luke didn't meet any of the definitions of the label at risk, but he had become at serious risk. And you know, it's what I came to realize, that we're all at risk. Whether good or bad, a moment, an event, it can be life-changing. But here's the kicker. Luke no longer cared. He was sad. He was hurt. He was angry. He was withdrawn. And there was nothing that his teacher, that his school, that a label could do to change that. His mom and I were afraid. We didn't know what to do. We tried to love him and encourage him. But what I came to realize in that experience is that sometimes even the facts don't matter. Because you see, after the legal process, it wasn't Luke's fault. The light was green. He was in his lane. We believe the person was committing suicide. But those facts didn't matter. What mattered was his heart. That's what truly mattered. And so, those experiences helped me realize that all the work we'd been doing in accountability, all the policy changes, all the data we were collecting, really couldn't get to the thing that truly mattered. There was a lot of talk at that time about data-driven decision making. We were all about it. And then I realized that if I put my right foot in ice water and my left foot in boiling water, that the data'd say I'm okay. But if you looked at me as a person, you'd say, "Jim, you got big problems." And boy, would you have been right. The difference between Natalie and the difference between Luke became so apparent to me. That the labels, the data, the averages didn't tell the whole story. And then one day a friend of mine, Ray, said, "You know, Jim, I actually think all this work you're doing on accountability isn't going to work." You see, we thought that if we built a perfect accountability model, that it could be replicated and scaled and it would change the game. I'd been working on that for 10 years, had a lot invested. And he gave me a mind shift. And as I thought about it, as I had these life experiences, I concluded he was totally right. And that's why I think the conversation needs to change. It's not about charters. It's not about districts. It's about excellence. And I want everybody to have excellence. And that means we need to change the conversation. It's what I love about TED. It's the beginning of a conversation. It's that drop in the pond. It's the expansion of the universe. It's the conversation worth having. They say there's pictures that are worth 1,000 words. And I want you to look at this for a minute and see if you agree. What I came to realize is that's what we're doing to far many students, far too many teachers. It's a system, and the system needs to be changed. It's unfair, it's unjust, it's not good for people. What is good for people is that personal connection. When you can look them in the eyes and you can say, you have greatness within you. You have gifts. Some are ready for those gifts to come out and shine. Others are less confident. They might not even believe you at first. But we got to keep working with them. Helping them discover their meaning, their purpose, their why. Today, Natalie's flourishing. She's 8 years old, and she's on top of the world. Luke, it's been a challenge. But today I can tell you he's got his college degree. He's an entrepreneur. He's blessed us with 2 grandsons. He's building a business, and now he's motivating and inspiring others. For me, these lessons have had a profound impact. I plan to spend the next 25 years trying to change education. And yes, systems and accountability and technology are important. But I'm so thankful that I've learned the thing that really matters. All people need that connection, that sense of belonging, the ability to grow, the ability to give. Tonight, I want you to go home to your table and continue that conversation. Thank you.